I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
This episode is brought to you by TaxAct. Don't do your taxes alone. Join TaxAct's National Admin Night. Admin nights are social gatherings for getting through your to-do list. So get ready for a night of fun, finding deductions, and filing taxes with TaxAct, where you can file your federal and state return for just $49 through April 8. Let's get together and get them over with. Visit taxact.com/admin-night for details.
This episode is brought to you by MGM Plus. From and its Horrors returns for Season 4, centered around a town that traps all those who enter. Terrifying creatures that come out at night. Horrors some wished had stayed buried, where desperate hope leads to darker truths. Dangerous new arrivals, a sinister figure, a shocking revelation. From Season 4 premieres April 19th on MGM Plus. Some doors should remain closed.
If you're in a career and you're thinking about what's next, your frame of reference is only what's in front of you. It's only what your colleagues are doing. It's like, oh, they go work for a bank or they go work for another consulting firm. Like, that's what you're comparing it to. Whereas if you actually go and disappear for a few months, you really get this like crazy different set of perspectives.
That was a little clip from my interview today with Will Rickard, who wrote a book about his travels through some of the stands along the Silk Road in a pursuit to find happiness, find out what happiness really means. And what is happiness, really? We dig into that topic, and it's a big one here on today's show. We also talk about how this particular set of destinations plays into what he discovered about himself and happiness while he was traveling along the Silk Road after quitting a corporate job and doing the bucket list thing. I'll explain what that is before we get into the interview. You might want to take the anti-bucket list approach after hearing that. And of course, a lot of topics swirling around the theme of happiness. And there's a lot of nuance to this topic, right? We talk about gratitude a lot on the show. It's something that I think is so important in life to have that gratitude. But sometimes you just aren't happy with a certain situation, and gratitude's not going to cut the mustard, or it'll make you better for a little bit, but you feel like you need to do something about that. On the other hand, we can fall into this trap of pursuing more, right? Always pursuing more and never really being content. So what does all this mean? And how does it relate to travel and what we're talking about today and these destinations in particular? And we dig into all of that in the interview. We also talk about the importance of having a purpose, how to stay calm in dangerous situations when you're traveling, why being enthusiastic for something is important and different than being passionate about something that you pursue, and so much more. It's all happening in today's interview. Plus, I'll get a little personal, sharing how moving abroad redefined in some ways my definition of happiness. All of that and much more happening in this episode right now. So buckle up, strap in, grab your favorite beverage. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire. No matter what your situation or experience, and part of the reason why us travelers want to fill our lives with travel is because on some level it makes us happy, right? And that's one thing we're talking about today. And when I looked up happiness in the thesaurus, it's kind of surprising because the words that they include as similar words like contentment, pleasure, satisfaction, cheerfulness, gaiety, joy, merriment, they all kind of mean something different in a way. And so it's really hard to pin down happiness. And I think that's one of the reasons why striving for happiness can be challenging, because it is something that's hard to pin down. I feel like we can, in some ways, feel happiness in a moment, but to say, oh, I have a happy life. I mean, life's filled with ups and downs, as we all know. So that can be a little more difficult. So anyway, we get into some of the nuance around this topic in today's conversation. That's why I thought this one was worth resharing, as these themes are timeless. And many of these themes we discussed today, of course, originate from Will's book, The Silk Road to Happiness. And Will is somebody who walked away from a pretty prestigious corporate job and set out on this journey along the Silk Road just to answer one of life's biggest questions: what actually makes us happy? And he talks about this anti-bucket list mindset, which is a powerful reframe for anyone out there who's tired of chasing goals that aren't theirs. We talk about some of the deeper cultural insights from these countries that a lot of travelers don't visit. And you're going to walk away with 5 powerful takeaways on what makes for a meaningful life. These are grounded in both philosophy and real-world travel experience. So a lot to unpack, and I hope you enjoy. Stick around on the back end if you'd like. I will share a little bit, I guess, personal thoughts on how happiness has shifted for me since moving abroad, particularly in the beginning of my journey living overseas in another country. And before we dive in, one last thing, zerototravel.com/newsletter. We have a free newsletter. You can sign up over there and join the community off the pod. Thanks for listening. Enjoy my conversation with Will, and I'll see you on the other side, my friend. Cheers. I'm on with Will Rickard, who just published a new book called The Silk Road to Happiness: Untold Stories from Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan. The stands. I'm really excited to have you on. You got a wild story that kind of led up to this trip, and sort of the crux of this book is it's really based on your experience traveling the stands and the Silk Road and answering that age-old question: what makes people happy? What makes you happy? What does happiness mean? So anyway, Will, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
Thanks, man. Super happy to be here. It's a good topic, happiness.
You got up at like 5 a.m. for this because you're all the way in Canada. I'm in Norway. So I got to give you a shout out for that. Have you had your coffee yet?
No, I haven't, but I just made tea. I'm thinking, like, am I going to go back to bed after this? So I don't know. Like, I didn't want to have coffee in case I'm like lying here awake. So I'll do that if I stay awake. I'll have coffee after this. So all good though, man. I didn't actually tell you I was in Canada.
Okay, that's okay. My goal is to get you so hyped that you're not going to want to go to bed. You're going to be like, oh man, I'm way too amped up.
Yeah, well, hopefully your audience feels so hyped as well after listening to this, man. So,
well, I'm excited. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, anytime you get into this question of happiness, it's like, what does happiness mean? Is there really a universal definition for happiness? Is it totally subjective, of course? I mean, there's so much around it. I was actually looking up the definitions between content and happy because I was like, well, what is the difference there? And the definition I looked up: content is in a state of peaceful happiness. This is according to the dictionary. And happiness is the state of being happy. So
whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, we're going to get into all that. And I want to hear how your experience on the road kind of maybe answered or didn't answer that question. But we got to go, as we normally do, back to where it all started for you, because you have a kind of an interesting story on how you ended up in the specific destinations. But also what I'm really interested in is what made you choose this project and this exploring this idea of happiness. But talk about life in Australia. What did you do coming? Did you go to university? What did you do coming out? What was kind of your path?
Yeah, so rewind a few years now, and I was working for the world's largest consulting firm, right? So it's one of these big global firms that has offices all around the world and hundreds of thousands of professionals. And I was living in my beachfront apartment in Manly Beach in Sydney. East facing. Wake up each morning with the sunrise, and go for a swim at the beach and whatever else. And then I'd take the ferry over to the city. Across Sydney Harbour and overlooking you see the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge. Go to my high-rise building to work and solve some interesting problems and whatever else. I was also finishing my master's degree at the time in accounting, and doing my professional accounting certificate. Which is pretty well regarded. Like if you want to go down that path, right? So, everyone around me was pleased to see me doing so well, right? Because, from the outside, it looks like it's a pretty good path, right? These firms are pretty hard to get into, in my business school, and this was like the top firm that people want to get into, right? And so
I guess you could say it's a pretty prestigious company.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and there's a reason, right? These firms are slick. There's a lot of opportunity. My superiors are very impressive. They're just incredibly intelligent, and the people around you are very inspiring, right? So, it's hard not to be inspired working in a place like this. Anyway, I was approaching that 2-year mark, and age 28, sort of just thinking like, what's next? Like, am I sticking around in this, or what am I doing with my life, right? Do I want to keep going? Because I don't know. I'm sort of getting a bit antsy, itchy feet, that sort of thing. So I'd had this idea for a book which I'd been discussing with my friend, weeks earlier, or I'd had it in my head for months earlier about, traveling to, far off destinations, and discussing a particular theme, taking photos of people and then writing a book about their lives, right?
Why a book? Why did that capture your attention? I mean, because you could just do a gap year, you could take off and travel. You don't necessarily have to do a project around it.
I mean, because I read a lot, right? I spend my time reading, and those who read probably get lots of ideas, right? I mean, anyone who writes books, they probably read a lot of books. So I don't know. I had so many ideas in my head, and so I was thinking, like, why not like try and figure this out? I mean, I'd never written a book before, and I'd been a failed photographer earlier on in my life. But that's a whole separate story. And I'd never written a book or anything like that, but I was like, I want to try this out, So I'm thinking, like, I could ask my work for a few weeks off, but I don't know, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, not enough. I want to go for longer than that. And the more I thought about it, the more distracted I got, right? So that's not great, particularly if you're on a good path, but you're sort of thinking, is this right for me? And so
it was this thing, like this nagging thing that just kind of kept hanging around.
Exactly. And so I write this like in the book, like as days went by, I mean, my thoughts, they drifted away from my spreadsheets and onto the, greener pastures of somewhere in Latin America or Africa or Asia or somewhere, right? And so I left work one day and I was reading the book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware, if you haven't read it.
Yeah, well, we had her on the show.
I missed that one. Right.
Yeah, so we can, if people can search the archives if they want to listen to that interview. But yeah, awesome woman. Amazing book.
It's an amazing book. And one of the things she finds is that, I think the number one regret is that people, they lived a life that was according to other people's goals and values and didn't chase what they really wanted. Right. So I sort of started to feel this like, crisis overwhelming me. Like, okay, like, is this going to be me? I mean, I'm only 28. There was, and I actually I read an article and I saw it recently, and it was called like the 28-year-old existential crisis. You're at that age, like, is it too late to change my career? Am I too old to be going traveling? Or like, what do I do? Right. So I called up my dad and I'm like, Dad, like, I'm sort of having a bit of a crisis. I'm thinking about like quitting and just going and just traveling somewhere. And he's like, Will, you'll be making $1 million in 15 years. And I'm like, yeah, 15 years. Like, what do I do until then? Right. Like, it's just like classic baby boomer thing to say, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do until then. Right. And so, he like drives to my house, picks me up and takes me over to his wife's house. And she's like, she goes, do you know how many people would give their left arm for your job? And I'm like, yes, like, I get it, but you're not giving me the answer that I want. Right. so as days went by, the commitment to my job, it dwindled, and I thought back to, the book Into the Wild, if you haven't read it, and I know one of your hosts talked about it in a recent episode, but what he says in the book is I think careers are a 20th century invention, and I don't want one, right? And that just resonated, right? I just sort of started questioning the whole system, the whole of society. What's the point of all this? Is this just made up? And I don't need this. I don't want this. It's just a way to keep people controlled. So it was pretty depressing sort of thoughts, right? So I'm having this sort of crisis. Like I don't know what I'm doing. And I was walking down the beach, and I opened up Instagram, and I saw a guy that I'd met, and he posted a picture of him, and it said "on the Silk Road." He was in Western China, and I was like, Silk Road, I don't really know what that is. And I sort of looked at the map, and it was next to Kazakhstan. I was like, oh, I literally know nothing about Kazakhstan. And I was like, all right, this is my sign. I'm doing it. So I ran home before I could change my mind, booked a flight to Kazakhstan, and the next day I would drop out of my master's degree, drop out of my accounting studies, and quit my job. So I would just go. I had a flight for 6 weeks, I think, 6 weeks from the date, or even less, 4 weeks from the date of the day I booked it. I would just go with no contacts, no plan, no knowledge of foreign languages. Hadn't really looked at them. I mean, I looked at a map a little bit. No Lonely Planet, nothing. I was like, I'm just gonna go and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, well, it's definitely one way to do it, right? If you're in that situation, you're having the existential crisis. I'm talking to you, the listener. It's like, well, that's certainly one way, right? You just book the flight. You're like, well, I guess I have to quit my job now, or I lose all this money on the flight. Talk about built-in accountability, right?
Exactly.
Well, so you got skin in the game, right?
Exactly, man. Exactly. and that was it. Like, because I remember saying that, I was like, well, any talk of my manager to try and talk me out of it, it's like, sorry, man, I booked the flight. Like, this was like.
Well, how did they react when you came in and said that?
Well, it was kind of funny because one of my colleagues, he'd said, "Look, I'm quitting." This is weeks earlier. He's like, "I'm quitting." And they're like, "Where are you going?" Like, "Oh, I'm going to the competitor firm." And they marched him out, right? Because in any of these big companies, if you go to a competitor, they'll just march you out on the spot. They'll say, "All right, leave your laptop here. Like, we're marching you out, right? Like, see you later, thanks, but you can't, like, we don't like this sort of thing." And I said that to my manager. I'm like, are they going to march me out like they did to Nick? And he goes, no, mate, like, he went to a competitor. You're going to Kazakhstan. Like, he's like, you're welcome to stay for the next few weeks. And it's fine. Like, it was an excellent experience, and it's got me to where I am now, which is awesome. And the guy who hired me actually said, he's like, hey, you're probably a bit too entrepreneurial for this place anyway. So it's been great, and I wish you well. And I said likewise. But yeah, onto the next phase, and whatever that will be.
In Australia, there is a pretty good culture around gap year and traveling and that sort of thing. I think, from what I know, I mean, a lot of Australians out there traveling. Is that something that you participated in, or did you come out and just kind of skip that whole thing and go right into the working world?
No, I definitely did. I took 2, in fact. So when I was a bit younger, I spent 6 months living in France, and this wasn't like an exchange program, but I lived there and studied. And then I also took a couple of years early, and traveled for several months around Europe. And I lived in a hostel in Albania for a month, and went to India and Iran, and about a bit of Africa as well. So I had done that some years earlier. So this wasn't like my first real travel experience, but it was, I don't know, the gap year thing. I didn't really need another year. I think if I was sort of like, my career had started, at age 26, and I was now age 28, and I was like, you know what, I'm in my career now. I've already done this whole gap year thing a couple of times. I don't need a whole year. I just want to go for a couple of months. So yeah, but it's true. It is definitely true. Australians love to travel, and the gap year thing is very common. Yeah. So there's no real shame around it, but yeah.
No, not at all. But I think it's a wonderful thing to have in your culture. Like, we didn't really have that in our culture, at least growing up when I did in the States. And so that's why when I started meeting people from the UK and Australia, for example, who had that concept in their culture as like an acceptable thing to do. I was like, well, this makes a lot of sense. Like, you learn a lot from traveling, and but I don't think you can discount those experiences as it relates to this existential crisis, right? I mean, you had been out in the world and you knew there was a big wide world out there to be explored.
Exactly.
You'd experienced it firsthand. So what were you doing leading up to the corporate job?
I was studying and I was working like kind of just jobs. Like, I was studying and just sort of putting myself through university. I'd been doing bar jobs. I'd been working in a job, like in a call center, just like selling wine to people and just all sorts of jobs, like just to get me through university. I was kind of late to the career thing. I was 26 when I got my first job, and my manager was actually older than me, and like, that's cool, like whatever. I'd spent a few years, like my early 20s, just traveling and kind of messing around and, doing my first degree. And then I was like, I may as well do a second one. I don't really know what I'm doing with my life. So, and then it was the right decision though, right? Because then it got me into this firm. So I was late to the career game, but hey, it got me to this amazing firm, which was like, oh, this is good. So I think at that time, I was like, you know what, like, I think my career has started now, and I don't think I need a whole year off. Like, and I know my mom would kill me if I'd done that, because she's like, well, you got to grow up at some point, sort of thing, right? So yeah, but I'm sure we all had that
you got to grow up thing.
Yeah, well, right. And it was kind of like, look, I've got a career now, and so I'm going to go for 3 months. I've already done this a few times, right, in my life. So just go for 3 months. I need to think about what I want to do next. I want to write this book. Maybe I'll just be a full-time author and make it big with that, or maybe I'll come back and live by the beach and I was thinking also, maybe I can work for the local like fruit store, being their accountant or something. Just like, I just want to live a really easy life, and and I'll get to where I'm at now. We'll talk about that later, because it's completely different and completely better. But yeah, I just wanted a few months just to really go and discuss this topic, and then think about what's next. Because here's another thing, right? Like, you think about if you're in a career, and I know that anyone who's quit their job and gone traveling experiences this. If you're in a career and you're thinking about what's next, your frame of reference is only what's in front of you. It's only what your colleagues are doing. It's like, oh, they go work for a bank, or they go work for another consulting firm. Like, that's what you're comparing it to. Whereas if you actually go and disappear for a few months, you really get this like crazy, different set of perspectives, right? You speak to all sorts of other travelers, all sorts of things, and you can think clearly, and so you can actually, trust your intuition as to what's next, as opposed to just being, around other corporate people and just going and doing other corporate things. So that's, that's a huge thing, I think, for a lot of people, and is that if you don't like your path, hey, what's next? Like, go traveling for a few months, like, and I know, like in the US, for example, it's not like really well done for people to do that. Oh, they worry they're not going to get a job when they come back. Like, no, wrong. Just like, go and do that and think about what it is that you want, and that can be like, a life-changing thing. So yeah.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip: hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire. The empty seat. Who is actually just that, an empty chair in your office, because you couldn't find someone to fill it. So it just sat there, costing you money with all its fancy ergonomic features. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can make it easy to fill that seat with the right candidate, with nearly 60% of businesses finding someone to interview in the first week alone. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
Now, back to the show. I don't know how long the sort of, as what you would describe as the existential crisis lasted. I feel like I have at least like 4 of those a year, by the way. So it's not like those go away.
True.
Well, I think it's just, it's easy to kind of question things sometimes. And, there's a lot around that. But, and that's kind of what I want to talk about here, because I feel like there is a balance when you're at that decision point. Just thinking back to times in my life when I've been at that decision point, trying to figure out, okay, am I going to like move on from this thing or whatever? At least for me, it was this sort of like trying to balance this idea of like recognizing the discontent that exists. It's like nothing's perfect, right? So there's always going to at some points there's going to be levels of discontent that pop in. I mean, it's just the ups and downs of life, I would say. And then when you have this feeling of gratitude around the things you have, right? So like you were saying, like, well, I have this apartment near the beach, and like there's a lot to be grateful for in those situations. And as your family members were pointing out, a lot of people would like to have a job like this and all this stuff, but you're still not happy. And then I feel like what can happen with some people is that you can end up in that sort of swimming between those two pools, I guess, for a long time. Or you just got to make a decision and hop in one or the other. But, that battle's like a never ending sort of thing. How do you reconcile like sort of the point of appreciation and gratitude with sort of like discontent and like being honest with yourself with that?
I mean, it's not easy, man. Like, and that's a very good. That's the main question that people ask. Like, to what extent should I just be happy with what I'm doing versus to what extent should I be ambitious and to go and do something else? And it's like this back and forth in our minds that we get. And my answer is, well, based on a conversation. So it was one of the it was the final conversation I had in this trip, and I was hoping to go through this chronologically, and we will. But the final conversation I had on this trip, I was back in Kyrgyzstan, which is in Bishkek, the capital, and I was actually waiting for the taxi to take me to the airport, and I met this woman who she ran the hostel in Bishkek, and I'm like, yeah, talking about happiness and whatever, and she goes, the most important thing to your happiness is to choose a career that you like. Right. The reason is that we spend so much time at work, so you may as well enjoy it. And I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. She's like, well, you're gonna have to try a few things out, right, and see what sticks. She goes, because if you don't like what you do, then someone else will come along who really does like it, and they'll do it better than you, right? And then you'll be at the bottom of the chain, and you don't want to be at the bottom of the chain, right? And so I think that is like, hey, if you're able to choose a career, then choose something different, right? You're able to try it out. So I think that particularly when you're young, and not even when you're young, you should try new things. And the whole being at the bottom of the chain thing, like, think of this, right? Like, our parents' generation, like, they may have stayed in the job for like 40 years, right? Or like grandparents, like, that's what they did. That's just like, they stay in a job for 30, 40 years. They have full job security, and they retire with a gold watch at the end of their career. Like, we don't have that. So there's no job security. Like, there's nothing like that. So if you sort of go into a job or a career that you're not super enthused about, well, there's going to be people that are very enthused about it. So you will be at the bottom of the hierarchy. And if you're at the bottom of the chain and there's no job security, well, then you're most likely to actually not be that successful. So you may as well choose something that you're enthused about. I'm not saying, follow your passion, or I'm not saying that. Like, that's maybe like, but I'm not going to advocate for that, but choose something you're enthused about, and stay ahead of the curve with it, right? Because you like it, because you see value in it, you're more likely to want to invest in it. You're more likely to want to continue your education. And so when you're at the top of the chain, you're less stressed because you're not worried you're going to get fired or all that sort of thing. So that's one. So in answering your question, is it gratitude for what you have versus going and pursuing more? I would say it's the going and pursuing more, because you are so grateful for your life that you have the opportunity to do that. So go and pursue more, and then be grateful for the changes.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, because when it comes to happiness, one of the things that can make people unhappy is constantly pursuing more. Right? This pursuit of more. But you're talking about it in a different way.
Okay, I'm gonna challenge you on that. So, and I've thought about this. I actually thought about this exact topic last night. So, the pursuing more, you've got two distinct things, right? You've got when it comes to your purpose, right? So that is like, uh, your career, any relationships, or your health. Like you should pursue more, right? You should have high standards for that, right? For example, if you don't like your job, you should pursue something different. You should raise your standards and do something different, right? If you're in a relationship and the girl you're with is treating you badly, you should pursue something different. You should pursue more, right? You should challenge her. You say, I don't want to be in this relationship. If you're unhealthy, right, you should pursue more. You should change. You should get up off the couch and go for a run, whatever it is, right? So from a purpose perspective, right? So these things are purpose related. You should be seeing more. You should be raising your standards. But it's the other thing, I think, when it comes to hedonism or pleasure, that's when I think that you should not pursue more. For example, anyone who's like, oh, like, yeah, I just want to fly business class, right? Like, I want more. I want to. I really, that's my goal. Once they do that, right, it's very hard to come back, right? You can't go back from that. People that fly business class, I've never flown business class, and I won't do it. But once you start flying business class, for example, you're in that, you're pursuing more, and you're temporarily happy, but then that's your new standard. So then you can't actually go back to economy. Just the thought of it is just so terrible. So the pursuing more thing is I believe for purpose is absolutely uh, a goal of life, I believe. But when it comes to hedonism or consumerism, buying things, luxury, that sort of thing, I think that it should be less. You should be comfortable with less. And I'm happy to provide examples of that. Using, like, I've been thinking about this exact topic. I mean, this is an important question, right? About the pursuing more versus contentment, right? But there's this concept, of in economics known as diminishing marginal utility, and I talk about this concept all the time, and that is the more we consume or the more we purchase of a particular good, the less satisfaction we gain, right? So that's to your point about pursuing more. So that is, for example, you may be walking down the street and you see this shirt or something like that in a store. It's like, wow, it's a really nice shirt. Yeah, okay, cool. I'm going to buy it. You wear the shirt, people compliment you, and you feel, oh, cool. I feel so great in this shirt and whatever else, right? But then the second time you wear it, it's just a normal shirt. It just goes and exists in your closet, right? So, and then what? So we're like, oh, that little buzz that I felt that I experienced from wearing this and buying this, because buying things makes us feel good. The buzz is gone. So then what do people do? Well, they go and buy more, right? And then the more we buy, the less satisfaction we gain from each subsequent purchase. So this is a term that I learned in studying economics, and I didn't know that economists would teach me this and give away their secrets. But truly, the more we purchase of a particular product, the less satisfaction we gain from it. So yeah, diminishing marginal utility. You should Google that one. That's an important one.
Yeah. What you're referring to, I mean, I think you used the word purpose, and that's a good one. I mean, this idea of, okay, yeah, maybe I should pursue more in the cases of where, if I'm asking myself the question, is this healthy for me, this relationship or whatever it is that you're talking about, right? And it's like, it comes back to sort of like worthiness maybe, or self-worth, right? It's like, well, okay, identifying the places where maybe you deserve more in some ways, but like it is a tricky balance. One thing that always comes back to for me is this idea of just awareness, like from a meta viewpoint. If you can develop an awareness around the thoughts and feelings around these debates, then you can better understand for yourself where you might fall into the trap of like pursuing more being a bad thing and pursuing more being a good thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh man, as I said, it's a tough question, but there is a quote in a book that I really love and that I brought along with me in the trip, and I quote in my book multiple times. The book is called Man's Search for Meaning. So hey, this is kind of what we're discussing, right? By Viktor Frankl. Yeah, right. And he says, what man needs is not a tensionless state, but rather a goal worthy of him striving for, right? So that is, you need something, you need a purpose, you need a reason to get out of bed in the morning, right? You need something. Otherwise, I don't know, I guess you don't see your life as being very valuable. You're talking self-worth, for example, but, so for example, right? And so, I mean, there's a man I met in Afghanistan, right? And he has an incredibly difficult life. You know, his dad had actually murdered his mother for suspected adultery, and then his father had actually been killed attempting to cross the river into Tajikistan to bring back food, right? And so, you know, because Afghanistan, there's a war and whatever else, and you know, really, really tragic and terrible, well, very difficult existence, right? You know, the man himself, you know, he has no money and he lives with his aunt. He's not married, and you know, he's in Afghanistan, which is like a pretty tough environment right now. And you know, so on the topic of happiness, I'm kind of like, you know, what makes you happy? Like what do you you know, what do you do for work? You know, and I'm thinking like, oh, should I even ask that, or is that kind of rude to even ask? And he's like, oh, you know, I've actually built 7 schools, you know, in the local area, and I teach children. You know, I've managed to get them all textbooks. I teach them English and mathematics, and my goal is that, you know, if we can educate these children, they're less likely to go down, like, you know, the radical path of the Taliban, for example, right? And if we can teach them to be tolerant and loving towards other people, right, then you know, the war can end sooner, right? So you think about that. So you think about this idea of wanting more and purpose. And for him, it's like, man, like, you know, why should I get out of bed in the morning? It's like, because I'm trying to create this, right? Like, that's a question we all ask. Like, why should I get out of bed in the morning, right? And if you think your job sucks or whatever else, then you're probably just going to stay in bed. And if you stay in bed, you get depressed, right? So if you have a purpose, or if you have some sort of goal, you know, as Viktor Frankl says, a goal worthy of striving for, if you have that, then you're more likely to actually, you know, go and you know, get out of bed and experience life, you know, in its fullest capacity. And as a result of that, you actually become someone completely different, you know. So for example, this guy in Afghanistan, you know, his whole family is dead, right? For you know, so what's his choice? His choice is to stay in bed and be depressed, or is his choice to actually go and build 7 schools, right? Like that's amazing. Like truly, that is amazing. So you know, and what motivates him? Well, it's a purpose. It's more. It's wanting more. It's wanting more out of life. It's wanting to make a difference.
I mean, that sounds, for you, is that sort of the genesis of this book as well? I mean, like we said, you could have just taken off to travel and whatever, indulged in the world travel lifestyle, but I mean, you chose to do this project and engage in these conversations. And I mean, part of that, I would imagine, well, it's for you, but it's also for, you're putting something out into the world that other people can benefit from, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like the you know, the discussion of happiness is an interesting one, because I mean, there's so many theories on it, right? You know, people have been discussing it for thousands of years. You know, what makes a good life? Like, what is happiness? Is happiness living in the present? Is happiness planning for the future and trying to have a better future? Is happiness pleasure seeking? Is happiness, like, what is it? And there's so many books on it and so many people that have discussed it. So it's just, you know, I figured if I'm going to go, I'm going to read all these books, ancient books. You know, I took, you know, books on Hinduism and Stoicism, and then more recently, you know, Walden by Thoreau, and you know, Man's Search for Meaning. You know, more modern classics, and that all discuss happiness in one way or another. So, you know, who's the book for? I mean, well, it's for me, I guess. It's for me because I'm trying to articulate these thoughts and trying to articulate what is happiness. But then it's also for anyone who's interested in travel and who's also interested in the concept of happiness. You know, and you know, there are a lot of books on happiness these days, and you know, I'm not like a psychologist or anything like that, and I'm also, I don't, it's not a self-help, you know, feel good all the time book. It's nothing. You know, I sort of cringe at those sorts of books. It what it does, well, at least what I try to make it do, is intertwine those sort of ancient and modern theories, not this sort of like feel good all day and be happy, just be happy, or whatever some of these, you know, self-helpy sorts of books tend to go into. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how this project, or maybe the book, even would have looked different or felt different or read differently in a different region of the world, right? Your experience with these specific countries, what did you find in terms of the answer to your overall question? Yeah, I guess I want to hear a little bit more about specifically the Silk Road and how maybe that was unique to to everything that you experienced in terms of these conversations.
Yep. That raises the question, like, why did I choose to go to the Stan countries, right? And the answer
you went on
is
Instagram.
Yeah. Well, I go on Instagram all the time, right? So, but and what was it about the Stan countries, right? Like, and the answer is, I mean, I wanted to go somewhere completely off the grid and where where no one really goes. And I mean, the question is, like, why does no one go to these countries? And I don't know, but I think maybe, like, since like 9/11, like 20 years ago, it sent the world to Afghanistan, right? We think about Afghanistan for the first time. So any country ending in Stan, people just are like weary about, right? That's my suspicion. So people just like, there's like, oh, I would never go to Kyrgyzstan because it's probably dangerous, right? And then you think of the movie Borat, for example, that's set in Kazakhstan, and how did they make that movie? It's like, well, no one knows anything about Kazakhstan, so you can portray it as you wish. So that's why I actually wanted to visit these countries, and to answer your question, the places that you go that have the least amount of Westerners and travelers are going to be the ones that have the that provide you the most unique experience, right? If I was to go to Thailand or something, it's just like, well, we know that there's just so many Australians and so many travelers, and locals don't really care about you, right? Because you're just one of the rest of them. But if you're the only one, then people are going to want to talk to you. They're going to be curious and whatever else. So
it's definitely easier, right?
Yeah, it's easier. That's right. Yeah, you go to a place where there's no travelers and people will speak to you, right? Like, because they're like, oh, hi, what are you doing here, sort of thing. Assuming that you can communicate. But so if I'd gone to Thailand and tried to write this, I mean, how would the experience have been? I don't know, probably not that profound. But with this, I mean, this is, I experienced, hospitality and curiosity like I've never in my life. I write in the book that these strangers, they open their lives and their homes to me, right? Like I would hitchhike with them and eat meals with them and sleep on their floors even, and this guy Masad, who I talked about before, he started crying whilst opening up to me and telling me about his life. So how would the experience be different? I don't know. But yeah. So anyway, there's also, I mean, there's sort of 5 themes of the book, which I can go through if you'd like. I mean, or we can. I mean, however you want to continue this conversation. But what I believe that, yeah, there are 5 things that constitute a good life, with respect to happiness.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment.
When you have 4 new tires, every drive feels fresh. Right now, buy 3 Select tires and get 1 for just $1 during the Cadillac Certified Service Fresh Start Tire event. Visit Cadillac.com/service offers or see dealer for full details. At participating US GM dealers only. Highest or equal value tire will be $1. Offer ends May 31st, 2026. Not available with other offers.
Now, back to the show. Let's hear them. How are we going to not hear them now?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, yeah, you better ask me them.
I'm not going to be happy.
Yeah, exactly. May as well end the conversation now. The first is minimalism, right? And I talked about that. These concepts, diminishing marginal utility, right? The more we consume of a particular product, the less satisfaction we gain. So if we have this idea like retail therapy. It's like, okay, like that's a temporary pleasure-seeking thing, but it's not. That doesn't constitute happiness, right? And then there's also this other concept known as hedonistic adaptation, and this is not an economic concept, but rather a social science or psychological concept, and that is, as soon as you go up the lifestyle chain, right? As soon as you, for example, you go and have a $200 dinner, let's say, or $100 dinner, it's like, wow, that was amazing, that was so great, right? But then you go do it again the next night, and the next night it wasn't as good. Why? Because you kind of expected, you knew what was going to happen. So that initial spike in happiness you don't get the second time, or the third time, or the fourth time, right? So what I believe, therefore, is that instead of falling victim to these like, oh, let's just go retail therapy, buy as much as we can, or let's go and do all these like fancy things all the time. These things are good every so often, like definitely, but as a lifestyle, it would be far wiser to live more simply and to save as much money as you can, so you can actually go and travel. Because if you have a well-paid job, it's like, well, is it worth that you work your ass off so you can just buy expensive clothes and only go out for expensive dinners every night? Is that worth it? Is your time worth that? Or is it that you've been planning on going traveling for 6 months and you keep talking about it, but you can't actually do it because you're prioritizing sort of present moment hedonism over long-term growth and goal setting, right? So that's there's this guy Ray Dalio who's like this, like, he owns a hedge fund. I don't even know what a hedge fund is. It's like some finance thing, but he's like super wealthy and super successful. I don't know what a hedge fund is, right? But and he wrote this book and called Principles, and he says that we have first order goals and we have second order goals. First order goals, like, is like the purpose stuff, right? Like I want to buy a house, I want to quit my job and go traveling, whatever. But the second order goals is like the more immediate, instant gratification, consumerist sort of, like, I want to buy that car, or I want to go retail therapy and buy like all sorts of clothes. And so then what he says is that you must keep your first order goals at the top of your mind, right? That is, this is my goal, this is what I'm doing. And so then with that in mind, you got to push away the second order goals, right? Because the second order goals will distract you from your first order goals, and you unfortunately won't achieve your first order goals if you're getting distracted. So you can call it minimalism. You can call it simple living. I know you talk about budget travel a lot on this podcast. You can call it essentialism. That's another. I think there's a book called Essentialism. It's don't just live, like super lean, but just only buy the essentials, right? Doesn't mean necessarily minimalism, but essentialism. So that's the first thing, right? Because your time is your most important resource, and 3 months or 6 month trip is far more valuable than going and buying clothes all the time, or buying a $50,000 car, or whatever it is on and the things that people do, right? So yeah, minimalism is the first theme. What do you think? Does that raise any questions?
I agree that it's nice to stay lean. I think there is a balance between you mentioned like the business class example, or the eating the fancy meal and not appreciating it the next time. I do think you can maintain those appreciations if you don't have a certain level of expectation and you're very much practicing gratitude. Then I think that it's definitely possible. Maybe gratitude's on your list, I don't know, but
it is, in fact.
Okay.
It wouldn't be a book about happiness without that in there.
Yeah.
I mean, without being
I don't feel like it's always black and white. You're not a terrible person if you own things, and it doesn't mean you're going to be totally unhappy. I've lived sort of both lives now, right? Like nomadically, and then now I have a home and like kids, and with that comes more stuff, probably more stuff than I've ever had before, and like that feels heavy sometimes, but also I'm not attached to it in the same way because I had experiences with minimalism. So it's a bit nuanced, but I understand the spirit behind what you're saying. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I don't like, as I said, I love going out for a nice dinner, with my wife. We do that sometimes, and it's great. Right. But it's when it becomes the everyday and that's when you stop appreciating it, because it's the norm.
Was she with you on this trip?
No. So this is a whole different story about how I met her, and if we have time, we can get to that. But
yeah.
So no, this was.
You didn't know her when you were doing this trip?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, the trip was a few years ago now, so it's taken me like 4 and a bit years to actually write the book.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like, right, there's as I said, I'm not saying pinch every penny. I'm definitely not saying that, but it's just once the lifestyle creep it creeps up on you, and it becomes the norm of every day you're doing this, and that's when you stop appreciating it, right? So that's the first thing. The second is, so reading deep, well, as deep as I could. It's kind of hard to read these sorts of books, but this book called the Bhagavad Gita, which is the kind of what like the Bible is to the Christians, like this is to the Hindus, right? Like this is their book, right? And then also reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, right? It's a book on Stoicism, both, the Bhagavad Gita was written like 2,500 years ago, and Meditations was written 2,000 years ago, and they both touch on this same idea, right? They call it different things, and I think if you can master this, then you will be happy, right? But it's not easy, right? And what, for example, Marcus Aurelius says in the book, he says that if you are troubled by something external, it is not the thing itself, but rather your estimate of it, and that you have the power to change at any moment. So that is, for example, tomorrow you've got all these plans. Like, let's say it's like summer and you're going to go to the beach. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go to the beach. Can't wait. So excited, whatever. Right. And then, you've got all these plans. You're going to go swimming and all the sort of stuff you do at the beach. But then it rains. Right. And so then you're like, oh, God damn, had all these plans. Right. But the point is that, so it's not actually the rain that's making you unhappy, but rather it's your own wanting the sun. Right, the rain is just the rain. It just is. It's just whatever. Rain is just water, and it happens all the time. But it's because we want the sun, is why we're being unhappy. So it's, if we just accept the rain, then we're not unhappy. We're happy. Right?
My version is I want my kids to go to bed at a certain time, so I can have some time to just chill out and unwind. Anyway, total sidebar.
But so yeah, like that's yeah, in the Hindus call it attachment, or practicing non-attachment, not being attached to outcomes, right? And so that is, in the present moment, if you're unhappy, it's not like because of the thing, but it's your estimate of it. It's because you're wanting it to be something else. You're attached to something else, right? So that's an important concept. And the reason I learned that, I was driving along the Pamir Highway, which is the most amazing. It's called the Roof of the World. Well, I think there's actually in Nepal they have a Roof of the World as well. But whatever, this is also called the Roof of the World. It's the second highest highway in the world, right? And it starts in southern Kyrgyzstan and goes all throughout Tajikistan, the Pamir Mountains,
beautiful,
and
huh?
to the border of Afghanistan. Oh, amazing! The most stunning scenery I've seen, right? Just mountains and hot springs, and and it's also known as the heroin highway, right? Because all the heroin that's produced in Afghanistan actually travels along this highway, and then through Kyrgyzstan, and then up into Europe and to North America, right? So it's known to be dangerous, right? Because, well, for obvious reasons. So I was driving along this road, and the car, we're driving at nighttime, which you shouldn't do along the Pamir Highway because there's no lights and whatever else, and the car happened to come to a complete stop. You see this boom noise, right? And the driver was he's like trying to drive but nothing, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? And the driver and my guide were talking in Farsi, and I couldn't understand what they were saying, and I'm like, what's happening? And this is it's the Pamir Highway in the mountains at 6,000 meters altitude, right? It's nighttime, it's dark, it's cold. I didn't have any warm clothing because it was summer. I didn't think it would get that cold. And he looks around at me, he turns around at me, he goes, and I'm just like, oh God, like what's going on, right? We're stuck here, like in the middle of the mountains, nowhere. I don't have a sleeping bag or a tent or anything. It's too cold. It's getting below zero. And we had to get out of the car and walk, and it's like pouring with rain, right? And when you're walking and there's so much mud that your foot gets stuck in the mud, and then your shoe comes off because it's stuck in the mud and all that. And it was just like we're walking for like an hour. It's like not great, right? And it's just like I don't even know where we're going because we're in the mountains. There's no one even here, right? And we eventually keep walking until we notice this like mud house, and the guy who was my guide, he just goes and knocks, and they let us sleep in their mud house, and I slept with a baby lamb, at my feet, and it was pretty cool, right? Wake up the next day and the sun's shining, and this woman had made us tea and she set us on our way, right, to go and get help to fix the car. But so the point is that in a moment like this, your tendency is to stress, to worry, to catastrophize, right? But if you simply accept it as, yeah, I mean, this is just a walk, this is an adventure, I'm in the mountains, this is amazing, right? If you accept these things, then you'll actually experience happiness, right? Or at least not unhappiness. And I'm not saying that's easy. Like, this is not easy, but from this perspective, happiness is a factor of, can you control your own mind? Can you control what it is that you want in the moment? If you're accepting of everything around you, you'll be happy. If you want something else, if you're like, oh, this sucks, this is cold, or like, oh, my feet are muddy, whatever, then you'll be unhappy, right? So that's the choice. And that's what Marcus Aurelius wrote, it's not the thing, it's your estimate of it, and that you have the power to change at any moment. So it's a good lesson, I think. So that's lesson 2, or theme 2.
So we got minimalism. This
attachment,
idea of not being able, attachment or detachment, maybe the idea of not controlling, not being attached to the external circumstances.
Yep, exactly.
What's the third?
So the third, I arrived in this town Korog, which is, and anyone who travels in the Silk Road. So the Pimir Highway is a very famous Silk Road route, and then the town of Korog, which is in Tajikistan, but it borders Afghanistan, right? So this is the town. If you want to go to Afghanistan, like, this is the town you should go through, just because it's like the region. Once you cross the border into Afghanistan, for example, the region is like it's controlled by the Allied, the Afghan government forces, and not the Taliban. So it's like somewhat safe. And I'm doing the inverted commas with my fingers here. It's somewhat safe. So I was in this town. Beautiful town, like, truly, like, it's quite it's very scenic, and it's mountainous, and there's like rivers, and you can go swimming in summer, and there's good bazaars with all sorts of good food, and nice restaurants, and it's a really cool place. And I met a man who actually owned the guest house, and one of the few people that speaks English. And so I was just chatting, so naturally the topic of happiness comes up, and I say, so, like, what do you do to be happy? And he says, meditate, right? So and it was funny because, some of the books I'd been reading, Walden, Bhagavad Gita, and of course Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. I don't think he actually talks too much about, well, I guess he does implicitly, but they talk about meditation, right? They talk, a lot of books talk about meditation, right? But what is that, right? Like, what? Because you always hear about this sort of thing, meditation, but there's a reason why people have been practicing this for thousands of years, right? And so the reason is, what I write in my book is that, let's say, for example, like, you and I, what do we do all day? We sit down at our desks and work, right? So we exercise we move our body, right? You move your body so to exercise it, right? So it makes it stronger, right? That's pretty obvious. But then with your mind, it's the opposite. Our minds are always moving. They're always thinking. They're worrying. They're thinking, like, oh, what time do gerbils go to sleep? Or, like, what did my manager really mean when they said this? Or, like, what am I going to be doing in 6 months? All this sort of stuff that goes on in our mind, right? So it's always moving. So to the contrary to exercise, what we do is we still our minds, right? So by stilling your mind, you're actually keeping it fit and strong. So does that make sense? It's kind of like the opposite. With your body, your body is doing nothing all day. So you move it, which makes it strong. And your mind is the opposite. Your mind is always moving. It's always thinking and speculating and worrying and all the stuff that your mind does. So you still it, which is to meditate, right? And so then whenever you start to worry, whatever, you can actually catch it and you can actually notice it.
Easier said than done, right?
Yeah, that is for sure. So the when I used this along the trip, I go into Afghanistan, and this man who owned the guest house, he actually took me there because he wanted to go there anyway. So I was like, amazing. I don't want to go by myself or without a guide. Someone who knows the area, and you cross the border and into Afghanistan, and this is like, it's getting kind of serious. I didn't tell my mom, or I didn't tell anyone that I was going into Afghanistan, just because it's like, well, my mom would be like, you're not going. And I'm like, I'm going. So I was just like, I'm not telling anyone. And so naturally, you walk across the border, and the border commissioner starts talking to us, and he's got a picture with the map, and he's pointing at the map. He's like, okay, as long as you stay within this area, you'll be fine. He goes, the closest Taliban controlled region is about 30 kilometers from here. So I'm like, oh, okay, 30 kilometers. Like, okay. And I'm like, you sure it's controlled by, like,
far?
Yeah, right. I'm like, you sure it's controlled? He's like, yeah, it's controlled by Afghan government, But naturally, of course, the tendency is to panic, right? And I talked about this in a different chapter and just before. But so as we're going, and we're in the back of a truck going into the town, I'm worrying and seizing up. But as Saeed, the man, had instructed about meditation, and the books, in Walden and Bhagavad Gita are talking about meditation, I just sat there, counted my breath, and the panic dissipated and my body relaxed, right? And so as a result, I could be more present and actually enjoying enjoying the scenery, right? And just sort of, I guess, content with what that was. And it's obviously not always as simple as that, right? Like, but it does work. And the reason it works is that people have been practicing it for thousands of years. I'm sure a psychologist, if you spoke to one, would recommend it. Like, it's known, like it works. Like it actually does work. So that is an effective tool. It's an effective tool.
Cool. Give us your 4 and 5. I like they have stories with each of these. That's cool.
Yep. Yeah. So fourth is the purpose stuff, which I talked about. You need a job or something that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning. And if you don't, then you just sort of get depressed, right? And you have people that hate their jobs and whatever else, and we know that this is common. And then they get depressed. So you need a purpose, because you spend so much time at work, right? And in we talk about wanting more versus being content, and I'm all about striving for more with your purpose. And the reason is that you become more, right? You're actually extending yourself and resolving more difficult problems, and as a result, you become smarter, you become more useful in the world, right? So the purpose stuff is an important one. I write in the book that a lot of people, they fear the change. They don't like their job, but they've told me since I've done this trip, I'd really love to go do something like that. I'd really love to go traveling. I'd really love to, go and live in Tahiti and teach scuba diving, or I'd really love to go and move to the countryside and fix antique cars. All this sort of stuff people tell me, right? But they fear change, right? And again, there is this quote in the book, Marcus Aurelius. He says, it is not death that man should fear, but rather he should fear never beginning to live. And I think that is like, hey, we're alive. You should pick a career or a job or a purpose that you think is valuable, because, don't fear change like you fear death. Just actually fear not living at all. Like, it's like, and maybe that sounds cliche. I don't know. Maybe it does, but it is an important, very important thing. So pick a purpose or a career or something that you see as valuable. Then, I do talk, there's a section like after leaving Afghanistan and going back into Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, the only, I guess, emotion to feel after that experience and all the, incredibly brave and tough people that I met in Afghanistan is, you only feel grateful for your life. Like, that is, and so the gratitude thing is incredibly important, right? If you go to Afghanistan, you understand the problems that people have, and then you think about the problems that you have. It's like, okay, like, I'm not going to complain anymore. Like, my life is so.
Your fifth point, gratitude?
Yeah, gratitude. Yeah. And that, I hope that doesn't sound cliche, because I think that every book on happiness talks about gratitude, but there's a reason.
Well,
for that,
you have to. I mean,
you have to be. That's right.
That's
exactly right. You have to be
non-negotiable, right?
Yeah,
I feel.
That's right. Exactly. It's like, hey, my life sucks, and then my life sucks, I'm unhappy. Then it's like, actually, no, I've got all these reasons to be grateful for. So
gets you right back on track.
Exactly. So that, like, like, for example, like, if you listen to this podcast, you're in the top percentage of most wealthy and fortunate people ever to grace this planet, right? Like, ever in the history of the world. Like, wow, that's amazing, right? Like, truly, that's amazing. So you think about that. Like, if you listen to this podcast, you are the top percent of wealthy and fortunate people who have such amazing lives ever to exist on this planet. So that's something to be grateful for. You think of, like, I mean, obviously don't talk about this in the book, but you think of with COVID right now, it's like, okay, like, how are you spending your days? How are you spending your time, right? Are you grateful for your life? Are you grateful for this opportunity to have downtime? And because a lot of people, for example, like, I found myself a year ago, pre-COVID, like, I was like, oh, I can't catch a break. I'm so busy, all these social engagements, all this travel, or whatever, all this stuff. I'm spending all my money, everything like that. I can't catch a break. And now you've got that with COVID. And this is going to be the only time in your life that you have this. So are you grateful for it, or are you just complaining? So if you're grateful for it, then you're more likely to, hey, write a book. You're more likely to do some course online that you can do for free. You're more likely to read more books, right? Or are you going to be pissed off and just watch Netflix all day. So if you're grateful, then you're actually going to make the most of this time, right? Because COVID, and I don't talk about COVID in my book, but this is hey, it's take your pick, right? Take your pick. Be grateful and use the time to unwind and learn a skill or something, or don't.
Well, I think for most of us, yeah, I think it's both. I mean, I've certainly had that experience with these lockdowns, but it's the gratitude that kind of has been able to pull me out when I'm having the other version of that, right? And it's just like, oh man, this is getting old, this routine and all this stuff is like, well, wait, hold on a second. Like, all right, well, it's also, this idea of giving yourself some space to be like, it's okay to be a little sad and depressed and unsure too, I think. But a gratitude is certainly a tool to, because there can be shame around that, like kind of shaming yourself or feeling bad or feeling guilty because you're feeling a little down. Like I generally am a positive person. So if I'm feeling down, I'm like, what's wrong with me, man? Like I got to pull myself out. But it's like, I think it's okay to feel that too. But you're understanding that this maybe comes back to point number 2, the idea of attachment. But if you're not attached to the emotion, if you're just sitting with the emotion, but well, this is going to pass through you like a wave, and you can get the gratitude can help you kind of, it's like a life jacket in a way, right? Can kind of bring it back to the top.
To your point, like you're exactly right. Like, we all get down and think, oh, is this ever going to end? That sort of thing. And I do that as well. You can ask my wife that. But it is the gratitude thing. There's, just the simple writing down, like, what am I grateful for, that can snap you out of it. So that's definitely something that I'm, this is not going to be around forever. Take your pick, like learn a skill, do something like that. Anyway.
Well, man, I'd say solid job distilling thousands of years of wisdom into these 5 points. I mean, I look at these, I just, of course, these are any list like this is debatable, but this is pretty, a lot of these are, you can see why it can be related to happiness or contentment. And I mean, obviously these are the lessons you pulled from your trip, putting this through the lens of travel. One thing I was thinking about that struck me, I'm looking at minimalism, attachment or non-attachment, meditation, purpose, gratitude. These are things that either travel, at least for me, really reinforce, like the travel experience can really reinforce these things or help you discover them, right? Like I didn't really know about minimalism or like that was even a thing until I started traveling. And then when I went somewhere with just a backpack and it was this feeling of like, of course, when I started traveling, there weren't all these blogs and stuff, so I'm dating myself. But it was just like this feeling of, oh, this feels good, like to not have a lot of stuff to take care of, and it's just like you had to have that experiential experience. I guess you have to feel it for yourself to understand what it means to you, and I feel like how it can change you. And like even though, like I said, I mean, I own more stuff now, but I know what that's like. I know that feeling, and it's made me less attached to things for my life because I traveled in that way for so long early. It just gave me a healthier relationship with things moving forward. So I just love that, these lessons you've carved out, I mean, they're learnable anywhere. You don't need to travel. But for me personally, it was travel that reinforced a lot of these or helped me discover them.
Yep. Absolutely, man. And this is a travel podcast, and so like travel, we can all agree is so great for you to actually think about these concepts and question stuff, and then think about what makes you happy, and it does reinforce all these things. So we're on the same page there. So absolutely agree.
Why should people travel to this region of the world?
I mean, well, okay, because one is that it's still in that sort of phase. I mean, this was a few years ago now when I was there, right? It's taken me, as I said, it's taken me 4 years to write the book, but I assume it's still the same. It's still very much in the phase of it's not overrun by travelers and tourists and stuff like that. So people are actually willing to talk to you and are curious about you. Once it gets flooded by travelers and tourists, like the locals sort of shy away a bit. I think that's as far as I know what the evolution is. But the people were so kind and so curious and so interesting, and the places, the mountains and the nature, and you can hitchhike so easily, and it's so safe. I mean, the thing is, with the exception of Afghanistan, these countries are very safe. The reason is that they used to be part of the Soviet Union, and in the Soviet Union there's like no crime, right? Because it's like a police state, so there's no crime. You don't have to worry about that. There's no crime at all. Very safe, very hospitable. People are kind, and just stunning. Stunning lakes and mountains and nature, and the villages are cool, and very photogenic. The stands. I really loved Kyrgyzstan. Yeah, as
I've heard so many good
really
things
stunning.
about
Yeah.
Kyrgyzstan.
Yeah, that you can travel without. I don't like if you have a Western passport, it's like it's pretty. The visa situation isn't like tough. I think Tajikistan was tough, but like not really. Actually, it wasn't tough. It took me like a couple of hours, but I had to get a visa. But it's go and travel these countries. They're amazing. So yeah,
it sounds like your life went from sort of the traditional status quo type of 9-to-5 existence to something completely different. So yeah, I mean, you've alluded to it a bit, but coming out of the trip in the last years, like where did this whole project and just this experience take you in your life?
Yep. Yeah. So it was funny, and I, as I said earlier on in the conversation, we had I talked about the conversation that I had with this woman in Kyrgyzstan who says, the most important thing is to pick a career that you like, right? And so I got back to Australia, and I was sort of, I decided to go back and finish my master's degree. I was like, look, I've almost done with it. Just finish it off. Right? There's no point in just not finishing it. Just get it done. Although you never use it, who cares? Just get it done. So I did that for a bit, and I also just did some freelance accounting and stuff like that. But I realized I'm like, I'm sort of just doing the same sort of work, but just on a lesser basis. And sort of spending more time at the beach. And there is a quote in Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says, when man does not have a deep sense of purpose, he distracts himself with pleasure. And that's what I was doing. I was just spending more time at the beach. And I'm like, I'm not really being true to my own potential. I'm not really, I'm just sort of existing. I'm just, doing freelance services, which I don't really like. And going to the beach. The beach is always fun, but it's not, age 28, like, I think I could do better. So, I'm sort of walking down the beach again, sort of back where I was only months earlier. I was thinking, like, what am I doing? Like surely there's more. I can do better. So what I did was I thought to myself, like, I want to work for a tech company, like a startup or something like that. I think a startup will be cool, because the startups have the quirkiest thinkers, and it's exciting and it's not mundane. And so I thought, I want to work for a startup. So I thought, what, I'm going to just move to the head or the center of the startup world, which is San Francisco, Silicon Valley. And I called up my dad. I'm like, hey dad, I'm moving home for 6 weeks because I need to save money. And he's like, all right, go for it. So I moved home and, kept working, saving everything I could, and then moved to San Francisco, booked a flight. I actually, flew there, arrived, and had enough savings to get me through, hopefully, however long it would take, 12 weeks or something. And applied for like 70 different startups, and one actually gave me a job and sponsored my work visa. And so it was, I got a job in a cool Silicon Valley startup in downtown San Francisco in a warehouse. And I mean this, that the day I started the job was the day I ran out of money. Like, and I mean that sincerely. So it was just meant to be, right? And then, fast, and that was in 2017, right? So things have changed. As I said, the book's taken me a while to write, but so since the company, it didn't take off. It's a startup, right? It kind of went up and down and whatever else. And I managed to get a different job with a San Francisco tech company, and moved up to Vancouver because which is west coast of Canada, because during that time, whilst living in San Francisco, I had made my first trip up to Canada, never been, and I was sitting there reading, and a beautiful girl came up and started talking to me. She's like, "Oh, what are you reading?" Blah blah blah. And then, we stayed in touch, and next thing we're visiting each other, and then I'm like, hey, I can actually move up. I can keep my San Francisco job, but I can just come live in Canada. Like, why not? Like, why would I not do that? I get all the opportunities from the land of opportunity, but I get to live in Canada, so that works great for me. And so I now live in Vancouver. We just got married recently.
Congratulations.
And thank you. Yeah. And I manage, roughly 20 people in from a sales perspective. So completely different, from a corporate analyst, solving the most complex problems, and now to be working for a cool tech company in sales is exactly like, I love it, and each day is just fun. It's remote, and with COVID, it's kind of limiting, but hey, pre-COVID, we were traveling all the time and working remote, and we're going to be doing all that. So I think if you can have a good purpose and also travel while doing that, have a good career and travel, then like that's great. So yeah, it's all worked out well. I'm happy, and hey, it's I'll finish off this by, if this is the end of the interview, I don't know, but there's a quote in the Bhagavad Gita, and this is a book that was written 2,500 years ago, and he says, well, the author says, far better to live your own life imperfectly than to live someone else's life perfectly. Right? Did I say that right? Far better to live one's own life imperfectly than to live someone else's life perfectly. Right? And that's the way it's been. It's been kind of messy, and it gets like that. But hey, I'm super happy with where it's led me, and feeling grateful and feeling like my purpose is good. And you do have to make those changes, and live, make the changes, take the risks, and you'll be rewarded. So yeah, that's the end of the story.
Well, I think that's a great place to end, and congratulations. This book sounds like it was a pretty big project for you, not just the trip itself, but then unpacking what it all means, then putting it all together. And I know you mentioned earlier, being a field photographer, but yet, you put out this photography book, and it obviously has got stories and everything like that with your photography in it. So anyway, congratulations on all that. Super cool. And yeah, it's always interesting to see where life takes people after an experience like this. Very much appreciate your time and sharing your experiences around this. And just to remind people, you want to let everybody know the title of the book and where they can get it and all that good stuff, or just let people know where they can find your work.
Yep. And thanks, Jason. I appreciate you having me on the show. It's been awesome. And the book is called The Silk Road to Happiness. It's on Amazon. It's an ebook. And I've actually all proceeds I'm donating to an organization called mentoring.org. So it's a mentor program that helps young people across the US find their purpose and reach their potential. So hey, if you don't like the book, at least it will go to a good cause, right? But yeah, and add me on LinkedIn. My name's Will Rickard, or add me on Instagram. Read the book. I'd love your feedback. And I'm hiring as well when it comes to. So if anyone who listens to this podcast and works in sales, just ping me on LinkedIn, and
you give us any. Talk. Oh, I guess they can look there and find the details.
Yeah, they can look there. Yeah.
There you go, throwing it out there.
Just thought I'd throw that in there.
He's just like, wait a minute, I just went into sales mode for a second. All right, let me get out of there now. Well, we can let you get some coffee now, man. I don't know if you're going back to bed or you're too charged up.
But I'm so awake now.
All right, good. So mission accomplished, man.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much. All right. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you very much to Will for stopping by the show. And thank you so much for listening to this episode. A lot of pods out there, and I really appreciate that you are a part of this listening community. If you want to keep in touch with the rest of the community, sign up over at zerototravel.com/newsletter for our free newsletter. It goes out once a week. And big topics in this one today. I told you before I leave you with a quote, I would share some personal thoughts on how happiness has shifted for me since moving abroad to Norway nearly 10 years ago, particularly when I first got here. Now, this is a deep topic. I could probably do an entire podcast series about this. In fact, I know I could. So we're just going to scratch the surface a little bit here. But I think really what this came down to was kind of, for me personally, it was multiple things happening at once. It was a big lifestyle change, going from being on my own, mostly at that point living in Colorado, to being married and then having a child and having a family and everything like that. So that was a big factor in this, of course, that you cannot discount. But also the geographic change of being in another country, being somewhat of an outsider, especially in the beginning when you aren't really used to a lot of some of the cultural norms of a place, and you are also just trying to see where you fit in. You're trying to learn the language, so everything that's going on around you is kind of a mystery because it just sounds like a bunch of gibberish. And you're just kind of there a lot of times in your own thoughts. And the expense factor, of course, in Norway, especially at the time when I first officially moved here, the dollar was much lower compared to the Norwegian kroner, and everything was very expensive. It would cost, it still is fairly expensive in Norway, but not as bad as it used to be. And this is the case even for Norwegians. They just don't eat out as much as Americans. I was doing a lot of these touring jobs. I would eat out a lot. You have your friend circle and all this stuff. I had to build a whole new community of friends and everything like that. So these challenges made me reflect on what actually makes me happy. And I think I'm a guy that I like to get out and like to do different things. I think a lot of us as travelers, we just love the novelty of going to a new place, meeting new people, and kind of the excitement that comes with that. And when you kind of strip that all away and you just live somewhere, and again, this was just me also coming out of a long period of being a nomad and trying to adjust to just living in one place. Finally did that in Colorado. And then coming overseas, I kind of had to redo that again. It really just made me assess what happiness is, what are the things that can bring me joy, and how can I create a mindset where I can find the joy in sort of the everyday routines, which I wasn't used to. I was used to in some ways, but, the travel routines of showing up in a different place all the time. You might have some similar routines, but everything around you is always changing. And it was just an adjustment. And I think it took a while for me to understand how to maybe find a little bit of the contentment and the joy in this sort of simple daily routines. That's really the key for me. And a lot of that was a mindset, right? I just need to kind of like slow down and see the value in, okay, instead of focusing on the things that I don't have anymore in terms of my lifestyle, or maybe that I'm used to in my previous lifestyle and my previous geographic location, I need to just recalibrate to this one. And just once I can recalibrate and see that and be a part of that and find the joy within that. And I think that it's been a very positive thing for me overall moving abroad, because there was a lot of struggle in the beginning for a while, yet all of that has led to my sort of ability to embrace a slower pace of life, perhaps, and to just try to find the contentment and joy in some of the more simple pleasures. That's a bit different than the sort of the exciting, quote unquote, exciting travel lifestyle I was living before. So anyway, I could go on and on. There's a lot to this, but it's not always easy to get off the road. It can be hard to get on the road, save up, and all the things you need to do to set yourself up for an adventure. And also on the flip side, it can be hard to get off the road when you pull that sort of excitement and novelty that you constantly have when you're traveling away. But all of these within contain opportunities. And I think one of the biggest opportunities that we have is to be able to find our happiness no matter where we are on the spectrum in that journey, to be able to just find the happiness, to let things settle, and just to find the joy and the contentment or the happiness or whatever word you want to use. That's been sort of the key for me, and I can carry that with me anywhere I go, right? If I'm able to find that internally through my mindset, through some of my practices that I can control, even though external things might be out of my control, I can find that and hold on to that, or just be in that wherever I am. So anyway, just wanted to share some thoughts on that. I'm not sure how that hits you, but there you go. I will leave you with this quote, which I think ties in with what I just shared. This one from Abraham Lincoln, who said, "Most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be." Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.